The City of Ember, Chapter 10 Restless Weeks. Poppy was now almost well. She still slept more than usual, but when she wasn't sleeping, she trumpled around the doctor's house, pulling spoons off the table and spilling cups of water and crumbling pages of books. That is, she was almost her old self. So Lena often asked Mrs. Murdo if it wasn't time for them to go and live with the others at the Pioneer Hotel. Mrs. Murdo always said that she wasn't quite ready. They'd wait until the brother came, she said. Lena had a feeling that the real reason was that she liked helping the doctor. She was always poring over the doctor's big medicine books and helping her pick her herbs and mix her remedies, so they stayed on. And Lena worked for the doctor. It wasn't that she didn't like working, but in Ember she'd had an adventurous job, an important job. She'd run with her messages all over the city, running the way that she loved to run, so fast she almost flew. It was hard for her to stay in one place all day. She felt restless and bored. She did a huge amount of cooking. Well, not cooking exactly, since the doctor rarely wanted to bother making a fire in the stove, but chopping and peeling and slicing and mixing. She wiped up spilled medicines and herbal solutions from the counters. She swept dirt from the floor. She pulled down cobwebs from the ceiling. There were always rags to be torn into bandages. There were always herbs to be pounded into powder, and bottles to be labeled and plants to be watered. While everyone else was out in the village doing new, interesting things and meeting new people, Lena was stuck doing housework. One day, she asked the doctor if there was any extra paper she could use for drawing. There wasn't, the doctor said, but if she could find blank pages at the backs of books, she could use those. So Lena tore out 8 blank pages, the doctor gave her a pencil, and she began drawing whenever she had a few minutes of free time. Out of habit, she drew the city that she had always drawn. She hardly knew how to draw anything else. But she thought that since she was here in the real world, she should try to be able to imagine the city much better than before. She remembered the first drawing she'd done with her colored pencils back in Ember, when she'd made the sky blue instead of its normal black. She had thought it was just an imaginary thing, a little crazy to draw a blue sky, but now look, the sky really was blue. She must have known it somehow, in some secret place in her mind. Something in her was a little bit magic, maybe. She could see beyond what was right in front of her eyes to things that used to be, or things that could be in the future. So she shut her eyes and tried to look deep into her imagination, but the old version of the city, the one that she'd drawn so many times, seemed to be stamped inside her eyelids. She kept drawing the same thing, the tall buildings, the lighted windows. She added a few extras. Some of these, a couple of trucks with their oxen, a chicken, but it didn't look quite right. Would the buildings be taller than the trees? How much taller? Would there be chickens in the city? She felt discouraged, so she set aside her city drawings and tried to draw what she saw around her. She drew the lemon tree outside the doctor's back door. She drew her bike. She drew the front of the doctor's house and the gate and the grapevine over the door. Once a truck parked a little way up the road to unload some crates, and she dashed out with her paper and pencil and drew the truck and its oxen. But none of these gave her quite the same thrill as drawing the city. There was a feeling that went with drawing the city, a feeling of longing and excitement and mystery. It was as if her drawings of the city were a half-open window, a glimpse of something that she couldn't quite see clearly. Torrin sometimes came up behind her when she was drawing and peered over her shoulder. Now and then he would point out some part of the picture that didn't look right, but most of the time he didn't comment at all. He was hoping with impatience these days, waiting for his brother to come home. "He'll be bringing me something," he said one day. "Every time he comes home, he brings me something." He went to the window seat and took his bag of treasures from the cabinet underneath. "I'll show you these," he said to Lena, "if you promise not to touch them." Lena wandered over. She didn't want to appear too interested, since Torrin was clearly never interested in anything that she did, but she was curious about these prized possessions that he'd been hiding. He reached into the bag and took out one thing at a time, placing it carefully on the wooden ledge of the window. There were 6 things, all different. Lena could not identify a single one of them. "Casper brought me these," Torrin said. He lined them up, making tiny adjustments to their positions until he got them just right. "They're all extinct." Lena took a step closer and bent down to look. "Don't touch them!" Torrin cried. "I'm not," said Lena irritably. "Well, what are they anyway?" Torrin pointed to the first thing, which was shaped like a T and made of scratched silver metal. "An aeroplane," Torin said. It carried people through the air. Oh, come on, said Lena. It's not even a foot long. Real airplanes did, Torin said. This is just a model of a real airplane. He pointed to the next one. A tank, he said. It runs over people and crushes them. What's the point of that? Lena asked. Torin sighed at Lena's stupidity. It's for fighting enemies, he said. The next thing looked like a short, chubby bike. Motorcycle, said Torin. It goes really fast. Then came a battered silver tube. Flashlight. You put this button and you push it and the light comes on. Show me, Lena said. It doesn't work, said Torin. I told you, all these are extinct. The next thing was a black rectangle with rows of some small colored buttons. Remote, said Torin. What's it for? It makes things happen when you press the buttons. What kind of things? Just things, said Torin. I don't know. It's very technical. The last thing was different from all the rest. It seemed to be an animal made of some stiff grayish material. It stood about 10 inches high on 4 thick feet. Elephant, said Torin. It's as tall as a house. Tall as a house? Lena tried to imagine it. You mean if I stood next to one, I'd be only this tall and come up to here? She pointed at this creature's knee. Torin swatted her hand away. It was the biggest animal on earth, he said. If it wrapped its nose around you, you would die. I'd love to see one, Lena said. You can't. There aren't any more. Torin spread his arms out, hiding his treasures from view. You have to go away now, he said. You only get one look. So Lena went out into the courtyard and picked a few green grapes, which turned out to be much too hard and sour to eat. Through the window, she could see Torin moving the tank and the motorcycle towards each other, and she could hear him making growling and crashing noises. What must the ancient world have been like, she wondered, with all these terrible, strange things moving around? Was it wonderful, or was it terrible? One afternoon, when Lena was in the village picking up some salt for the doctor, she saw a long line of people at a clothing shop. A few Emberites were among them. Lizzie was in line, wearing the black scarf around her neck that she'd worn ever since she arrived to show that she was mourning for Looper, her boyfriend back in Ember. Why are there so many people here? Lena asked. They have eyeglasses, Lizzie said. A roamer brought in a special load of them yesterday. Glasses? But you don't wear glasses. These are dark glasses, Lizzie said. They call them sunglasses. They make it so the light doesn't hurt your eyes as much. Most of the people at Sparks already had sunglasses. A couple of the work leaders, understanding how much the light bothered the Emberites' eyes, traded some extra wooden crates for a couple of boxes of these glasses and gave them out for free. Lena tried some on but didn't like them because they made all the green look brownish. She also thought they made people look sneaky, as if they had evil secret plans. Lena liked going to the market plaza. It was always alive with people and animals, and the markets had things that she'd never seen before. Sandals made of old truck tires, hats and baskets woven of straw. It was a noisy, bustling, interesting place. It was also very messy. The animals made the mess. Goats and oxen pulling carts in from the fields left their big, smelly plops all over. These got cleaned up eventually. Someone came and scraped them into buckets and took them away. But often this didn't happen until halfway through the morning, and people had to step carefully until then and breathe in that powerful smell. This gave Lena a good idea. She would do a favor for the marketplace, she decided. Everyone would appreciate it. So the next morning, just at dawn, she rolled her bike down to the plaza with a big bucket hanging from the handlebars. She scooped up a load of the cow plops and goat plops and dumped it into the river. Back and forth from the plaza to the river she went, scraping up one smelly, squishy load after another, and when she was just about to dump the last load, one of the shopkeepers arrived. She smiled at him, expecting some words of approval, but instead his face twisted in rage. "What are you doing?" he shouted. He started running towards her. "Dumping that good stuff in the river?" He seemed unable to believe his eyes. "What is the matter with you?" Good stuff, thought Lena. What is he talking about? He snatched the bucket out of her hand. "You people are..." He stopped. He pressed his lips together and closed his eyes for a moment. "All right," he said. "I suppose you didn't know. This stuff is precious. You don't throw it in the river." Lena took a step backward. She felt as if she'd been slapped in the face. "Oh," she said. "Then what do you do with it?" "It goes out to the fields," the man said. "It goes into the rotting pile, and when it's ready, they dig it into the ground. It's fertilizer. I guess you've never heard of it." "No," said Lena. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I was trying to be helpful." "The most helpful thing you people could do would be to, well, never mind." He gave Lena a last disgusted look and walked away, leaving her with a half-filled bucket she didn't know what to do with. She carried it out to the village and up the road, and when no one was around, she dumped its contents at the side of a field. It wasn't only Lena who got into this kind of trouble. As time went on, she heard about other people doing or saying the wrong thing and irritating the people of Sparks. Sometimes it was because they seemed stupid. People from Ember were frightened by chickens, had never seen a cloud, and didn't know the meaning of ordinary words like storm and forest and cat and lemon. They knew nothing about history. They'd never heard of other countries. They didn't even know that the earth was a round ball. To the villagers, they seemed unbelievably dumb. On the other hand, they sometimes acted a bit superior, boasting of the things they'd had in their underground city. The villagers didn't like hearing that Ember people had had electric lights and flush toilets and hot and cold running water. Once, when Lister Monk, who had been the pipework supervisor, was telling a Sparks man about the generator, the man called him a liar. When Lister protested that he was telling the truth and implied that Sparks was rather backward place compared to Ember, the man hit him. It took 5 people to break up the fight. Worst of all was the ravenous hunger of the Emberites. The village families were pleased that the strangers were so impressed by their fruits and vegetables, but they were also worried. Their leaders had told them the newcomers were to be fed, and all households were supplied with extra food for the purpose. But the people of Ember never seemed to get full. They cleaned every last crumb off their plates, asked for seconds, finished those off, and then sat there looking hungry. The villagers resented it. Lena sometimes overheard them talking in the markets. "It's too much to ask," she heard a woman grumbling. "And these cave people are going to be nearly here for 5 more months. Am I going to have to give them some of my strawberry crop? I don't see why I should." And another woman was even more direct. "I wish they'd just go out and get out of here," she said. "It's hard enough to feed your own family, much less a bunch of strangers." Lena wasn't used to feeling unwanted. She didn't like it. There was plenty of things about this place she didn't like. The dust that coated her feet and legs, for instance, turning them a yellowish brown. The tiny bugs that bit her and made red, itchy spots in her arms. The way the sun burned the back of her neck. This place wasn't so perfect. She wanted to tell those crabby villagers. In Ember, for instance, they didn't have so many mean, snotty people as they did here. Sometimes Lena rode down to the Pioneer Hotel to see Dune. He always seemed to be glad to see her, but it wasn't the same as it had been back in Ember when they were involved in the desperate search for a way out of their doomed city. Dune showed her around the Pioneer, and he told her about the work that he did and the people he ate his lunch with. But he seemed distracted or troubled, as if he was trying to solve a problem that he wasn't telling her about. Lena would ride back to the doctor's house after these visits with thoughts struggling against each other in her mind. She missed the old Dune, her clever, adventurous partner, and she herself felt different here too. She didn't know what to do or how to be. Some of the people were trying to be kind, but there was so much unkindness mixed in the kindness to the people of Sparks. The people of Ember were just a nuisance. How could they stay in a place where they weren't wanted? This world was huge. There must be another place in it for the people of Ember.